We're going to be moving right along in Genesis 37 today. The title of the message is Seeds of Hate. It's perfect for Valentine's Day. God just works things out so well, you know. I know that we are still trying to put behind the pandemic of COVID, but this world has many pandemics or epidemics outside of viruses and things like that. For instance, hatred is growing exponentially. And I know that we do use the word hate pretty loosely nowadays, like the word love. I told one of my kids recently that I think they say they love food more than they tell dad they love me. And I'm always trying to correct their use of the word love, right? So that it doesn't lose its meaning. And similarly, the word hate gets thrown around a lot. iHeartRadio had a list of 10 things that they said are universally hated by everyone. Number 10 was couples who argue in front of friends. Number 9, slow internet. 8, when people don't use a turn signal. 7, close talkers. 6, clipping fingernails or toenails at work. 5, talking during movies. 4, being told to calm down. 3, group texts with too many people. 2, slow walkers. And number 1 on their list was loud chewing. So hate, the word hate in that context might get tossed around willy-nilly. But true hatred is a big issue. It's a big problem. Many things are fueled by hate. Wars, violence, murder, suicide, bullying, abuse, neglect. You could go on. The list goes on and on and on. There are plenty of websites and magazines and articles and books talking about hate and trying to tell people how to deal with it, how to get rid of it, where does it come from, all those kinds of things, even whether it's good or bad. And you're like, well, how could there be a good hate? Well, there actually is good hate. We are called to hate sin. The Bible teaches us about that. The Bible also talks about God having hatred, but it's the right kind. It's a just kind. It's a righteous hate. And the world does not have the depth of understanding that we do about hate and how it grows in sinful hearts. And they even might try to get rid of it, but they don't have the best reason to get rid of it like we do. You see, we refuse to harbor hatred because of what Christ has done for us. And so that fire of hate that we could plunge ourselves into is constantly being drowned by the never-ending river of love that's poured out on us through Christ. And today, as we study Genesis 37 and we begin the story of Joseph, we will see seeds of hate planted, nurtured, and fertilized until they spring forth and bear fruit. But I hope that by the time we leave this morning, that we will be better prepared to recognize, address, and prevent those seeds from being planted in our own hearts and nurtured and springing forth and bearing fruit in our own lives. And I prayed after communion, so we're going to jump right into verses 1 and 2 of Genesis chapter 37. Jacob lived in the land where his father had stayed, the land of Canaan. These are the family records of Jacob. At 17 years of age, Joseph tended sheep with his brothers. The young man was working with the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, his father's wives, and he brought a bad report about them to their father. So that's where we're starting. And as we study the story of Joseph, which is a big part of the rest of Genesis, we're going to see, well, it's tempting to always view Joseph in a positive light, right? And there's a lot of reason to do that. He's a great character. There's a lot to admire about his life and the choices that he makes. But he's not perfect, all right? And we're going to see that as well. And the hard part about Genesis is that we're often told about events and circumstance. I mean, just things that happen, things that people do with no insight into their motives. And so we're left to our imaginations and our deductive reasoning to figure out, well, why did so-and-so do what they did? And we can't ever really know with certainty. And as we study this story, we're going to see Joseph's relationship with his brothers, well, it's going to become increasingly problematic. And it starts as a simmer, but then gives way to a rolling, raging boil. But this is where it starts. It says that Joseph brought a bad report about some of his brothers to their father. Now, we don't know, was Joseph even supposed to be reporting on them? Or was this something that he did on his own volition? And there's some good reasons based on the original language to think that maybe Joseph even embellished things about this report. Maybe he even made up some things and told lies to make his brothers look bad. So was he a liar or just a tattletale? I don't know. Was he a tattletale or just a messenger doing his job? I don't know. But what we do know with certainty is that it did not help his relationship with his brothers. And that's why it's in this story. The first seed was planted, and it was planted by Joseph. And the next one would be planted by his father. Now Israel loved Joseph more than his other sons because Joseph was a son born to him in his old age. We would also add because he was the son of Rachel and not Leah. And he made a long sleeve robe for him. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not bring themselves to speak peaceably to him. So then we see the next seed being planted, and this one by Israel. Not only does he have a favorite child, but instead of doing what you're supposed to do in that situation, keep it to yourself and try really hard not to say or do anything to give yourself away. I'm just kidding. You're not supposed to have favorites. But instead of being thoughtful of his other sons, he makes Joseph a special coat. Many of you might know it more famously as the coat of many colors. This translation says a long sleeve robe. The reality is that the original language makes it hard for interpreters to really get the specific details about what this coat looked like. But it was a special gift. It was a gift that fueled the fire. Most likely the family already knew that Joseph was the favorite, but now their father goes around and makes a show of it. He thought he was putting a tunic on Joseph's back, but he was putting a target on it instead. And all this is very ironic because Israel and his brother Esau had already suffered from their own parents practicing favoritism with them, and which makes this even more unthinkable and just downright stupid. And let's not forget that Jacob had already been planting seeds in the family because of the favoritism that he showed among Leah and Rachel and their kids. It's all a mess. And then Joseph had a dream. Verse 5. When he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. He said to them, "Listen to this dream I had. There we were, binding sheaves of grain in the field. Suddenly my sheaf stood up, and your sheaves gathered around it and bowed down to my sheaf. Are you really going to reign over us?" His brothers asked him. "Are you really going to rule us?" So they hated him even more because of his dream and what he had said. Well, then Joseph goes and does this. God gave him the dream, but I didn't see anything about God telling him to go tell his brothers like he did. Right? And you would think after their reaction to the dream that Joseph would get, oh, there's some tension here. There's and now maybe he gets it and he's going to start to recognize it. So he's going to go talk to his dad. "Dad, listen, we got a problem. The coat and then this, me and my brothers, there's tension here." And so maybe he's going to start listening to his brothers and kind of keep a low profile, right? Be humble, start mending these relationships. That's what we're hoping to see. Well, let's see what Joseph does. Then he had another dream and told it to his brothers. Well, so much for that. "Look," he said, "I had another dream. And this time the sun, moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to me." He told his father and brothers, and his father rebuked him. "What kind of dream is this that you've had?" he said. "Am I and your mother and your brothers really going to come and bow down to the ground before you?" His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. Well, these are the actions of a young man who just hasn't learned yet. And his father's not helping him. Instead of recognize what's going on and trying to help mend these relationships, Israel has made it worse. So Joseph has another dream, and the dream has the same meaning as the first one. In fact, in the story of Joseph, you're going to see a lot of dreams, and they come in pairs. And in chapter 41, when Pharaoh had 2 of these dreams, here's what Joseph said about that in verse 32. Now, as for the repeating of the dream to Pharaoh twice, it means that the matter is confirmed by God, and God will quickly bring it about. So this second dream that Joseph has is a confirmation. It's a solidifying of what God intends to do. And the sun and the moon are his father and mother. And of course we know, well, in the chronology of the story, Rachel has already died. So we would interpret this to be, it's about the family. So we would interpret this to be the new matriarch or whoever stepped into the role as Joseph's mom after Rachel's death. And the 11 stars are his brothers. And we're going to watch these relationships descend to the point that these brothers want to murder Joseph. But hatred like that does not come out of nowhere. We all know. When we blow up at our spouse, or our kids, our family, our co-workers, or the person that cut us off on the highway, that stuff doesn't just come out of nowhere. When somebody decides to go shoot up a crowd of people, it wasn't like they were living with good relationships and woke up one day and said, hey, I'm just going to go kill a bunch of people now. Hate like that, it builds and it builds. And if we don't deal with it early, it gets increasingly more difficult to eliminate. Which is why we must deal with the seeds of hate before they sprout. Right here, seeds are being planted. Jacob and Joseph may have not even known that they were planting them, but they were. And the brothers don't do anything about it either. It's a two-way street. We have seed planters and we have seed bearers. Right? And so, in fact, as we study the rest of the story and we see it unfold, we're going to recognize that the brothers were able to conceal the extent of their hate. And so we have 2 problems. We have people planting seeds of hate, Joseph and Israel, by their thoughtless, careless, inconsiderate actions. And then we have the brothers harboring those seeds and concealing their hate rather than acknowledging it, confessing, forgiving, seeking reconciliation. We can find ourselves with the same problems. Sometimes we are planting seeds of hate in someone else's heart, and that usually happens it's very simple, because we don't treat people the way that we would want to be treated. Right? Matthew 7:12. So in everything, do to others what you would have them do to you. For this sums up the law and the prophets. So Joseph being a tattletale, Israel showing favoritism to one son over the others, and then Joseph being inconsiderate in how he took his dream to his brothers. These things, they build up resentment. And when we don't deal with those things quickly, they just grow. It's inevitable. If we allow those seeds to stay, they will grow. Sometimes we know that we're planting those seeds. Oh, God help us, sometimes we treat people poorly on purpose. But other times we're ignorant of it, right? We don't even recognize that we're doing it. Now, it's true that people could develop hatred toward us without any wrongdoing on our parts. That is possible. And we're going to look at one way that manifests itself a little bit more later. It's also possible for us to plant those seeds in our own hearts without anyone actually doing anything wrong to us. Because we can make false assumptions. We can be overly critical. We can be overly sensitive. And so we can plant those seeds in our own hearts. But that's not what was really happening in this story. Joseph's brothers' hatred is not justified, but it is based in reality. They were being mistreated. Israel and Joseph, though, didn't recognize the harm they were bringing to these relationships. And that usually happens when we just don't think about others. It's really natural and easy for us to do. And Joseph was a young guy, so we would kind of expect that from a young man like him. But Israel should have known better. And neither one of them were actively considering the thoughts and feelings of the other sons. And we shouldn't make the same mistake in our relationships. We need to actively consider the thoughts and feelings of others. That's one of the ways that we deal with these seeds of hate or prevent them from being planted altogether. You see, if I just go about my life just being me, just doing Matt things and not thinking about how my words and actions impact other people, how they might be perceived by others, or how they respond to them, well, I'm going to bulldoze over a lot of people. Right? Now, this doesn't mean that I should live my life with my goal as being a people pleaser. Absolutely not. Nor does it mean that I should stop presenting the truth just to spare the feelings of others. But I do need to be thoughtful and considerate. We all do. If you think that you haven't hurt anybody lately with your words or your actions, then either you have not been in contact with other people or you're not thinking hard enough. It really does take intentional reflection and humility, and we will hurt our relationships if we don't stop to consider the feelings and the perspective of others. So many times these seeds of hate are allowed to grow because we don't even look for them. Right? We're too focused on ourselves. And then there's other times that they grow because we ignore them. We might think that we get a glimpse of a seed like that, but then we just convince ourselves, no, that's not what I saw. That's not. I mean, we all know what it's like to get an inkling that you hurt somebody, but then you're like, no, I'm just going to go on and pretend like that didn't happen. Like, nah, they're not hurt. No, I didn't do anything. They're just being sensitive, right? And so I don't need to do anything. Or you get an inkling that you were mean or rude or difficult, and then what do? We do yoga in our head to convince ourselves that we weren't. And so instead of apologizing or making peace, we're like, no, I don't want to do that. Instead, I'm going to represent myself in court and start making oral arguments instead. And it just spirals. And being sensitive to the Holy Spirit, part of that is being sensitive to the feelings of others when the Holy Spirit comes knocking on our hearts about conflict that we've either recognized or created. And we know what it's like to resist His work in our hearts. We're really good at that. That comes naturally. Oh, and we love to defend ourselves and to give ourselves every conceivable benefit of the doubt, and all the assumptions that we make about our own motives, they're always going to be positive, while we rake everybody else under the coals, don't give them the benefit of the doubt, and assume that their motives are always bad. But if you want to prevent the seeds of hate, then give others the same consideration that you give yourself. Not easy to do, but it's what we need to strive for. And then there's the other side. When we're not the seed planter, but we're the seed bearer. And we need to act quickly when that's the case. And Israel and Joseph, yeah, they were being inconsiderate, but Joseph's brothers don't handle this well either. For starters, some of the resentment they had toward Joseph was unwarranted to begin with. He didn't ask to get special treatment from his father. He didn't even ask to have the dream. So they're being inconsiderate of Joseph too, but it's going to go a lot further than this because they don't deal with it. Verses 12 through 17. His brothers had gone to pasture their father's flocks at Shechem. Israel said to Joseph, "Your brothers, you know, are pasturing the flocks at Shechem. Get ready, I'm sending you to them." "I'm ready," Joseph replied. Then Israel said to him, "Go and see how your brothers and the flocks are doing, and bring back word to me." So he sent him from the Hebron valley, and he went to Shechem. A man found him there, wandering in the field, and asked him, "What are you looking for?" "I'm looking for my brothers," Joseph said. "Can you tell me where they're pasturing their flocks?" They've moved on from here," the man said. I heard them say, 'Let's go to Dothan.'" So Joseph set out after his brothers and found them at Dothan. This is a long trip that he took. Actually, it appears that he went like 65 miles from home to find his brothers. And it's clear that neither Israel nor Joseph really understood and recognized the extent of the hate that the brothers had. We're going to see why. Because otherwise, Israel would not have sent Joseph on this trip, and Joseph would not have wanted to go. Now, it's possible that neither of them even had an inkling that there was tension in their relationships, but that seems pretty inconceivable. I think the more likely scenario is that they underestimated the hate in these brothers. And that is a dangerous thing to do. Don't underestimate hate. That will set you up for some bad stuff. Everyone who knows someone who went off the deep end and who ended up doing something violent either to others or to themselves looks back and realizes that they did not recognize the amount of hate that filled that person. And sometimes it's hate directed at other people, and sometimes it's self-hate. And when we underestimate hate, we are left unprepared for where it leads. And we will be caught by surprise, and that applies to many situations. Whether it's trying not to ignore the signs that someone will become violent or suicidal. Whether it's making sure that we take time to care for people that we recognize may be struggling with hate. Or even being prepared for our own persecution. We can underestimate the hate that the world will have towards God's people. Jesus made it clear that we need to be prepared to be hated and persecuted if we want to follow Him faithfully. Even more so, the closer that we get to the tribulation. And then especially in the tribulation. I just gave myself away. I know, I confess. I do not believe in a pre-tribulation rapture. Now, for some of you, you're like, I don't know what you're talking about. And others of you are like, and that statement alone is enough to get people fired in some places. But I trust that our church is a safe place for me to share my beliefs. And I do believe that. I didn't used to believe that way, but it's the Bible. Studying the Bible has taken me to the place that I believe that we will be here during the tribulation. And some of you have already seen, because last week I didn't have to preach last Sunday, and so I had some spare time. And I took that time to write down and organize my thoughts and my journey of how I arrived at that conclusion. And so I put that into an article on my blog, and some of you have already read it, but others don't even know about it. But I will include that link in my email to the church this week. Now, I'm not going to teach on that right now, but as I was writing this and it came up, and I thought, well, I'm going to mention that. Because I am eventually going to teach on that. After we get finished with Genesis, I'm going to do a short series, but then we're going to go to Matthew. And once we get to the end of Matthew, chapter 24, we'll really dig into it. But what happened here with Jesus is that one of the things that He did when He sent out the 12 apostles, 2 by 2, He warned them in Matthew 10:22, "You will be hated by all for my name's sake, but the one who endures to the end will be saved." And then when Jesus was preparing His disciples for the end times, He warned them of what to expect in Matthew 24, verse 9. "They will deliver you up to tribulation and put you to death. And you will be hated by all nations for my name's sake." You see, the point is that if we underestimate the hatred that already exists in our world and is growing exponentially, hatred toward God and toward His people, then we will not be prepared to endure to the end. And Jesus knew that people would not be prepared for this and that they wouldn't endure. That's why He said in the very next verse, "And then many will fall away and betray one another and hate one another." He's talking about people who would profess to be Christians. People who say, yeah, I'm a Christian, who go to church, maybe even give, maybe even read their Bible. Many will fall away because they didn't count the cost of following Jesus. And they weren't prepared to endure to the end. Let's not let that be us. Tribulation things aside, people can think differently on that. As long as you're prepared either way, that's what matters the most. So let's not let Riviera be a place where we are not prepared. Let's not underestimate hate of any variety. If you see someone headed down that road, intervene. Step in. Show them the love of Christ. Let them know that they are valuable to you, but even more importantly to their Creator. And be prepared. Don't ignore the signs and seeds of hatred. Be prepared to be hated as you follow Jesus. Just make sure that you're hated for the right reasons and not the wrong ones, okay? And Israel and Joseph underestimated hate. And it is going to cost. It's going to cost them. We're going to finish 18 through 36. They saw him in the distance, and before he had reached them, they plotted to kill him. They said to one another, "Oh, look, here comes that dream expert. So now, come on, let's kill him and throw him into one of the pits. We can say that a vicious animal ate him. Then we'll see what becomes of his dreams." When Reuben heard this, he tried to save him from them. He said, "Let's not take his life." Reuben also said to them, "Don't shed blood. Throw him into the pit in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him," intending to rescue him from them and return him to his father. When Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped off Joseph's robe, the long-sleeve robe that he had on. Then they took him and threw him into the pit. The pit was empty, without water. They sat down to eat a meal, and when they looked up, there was a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. Their camels were carrying aromatic gum, balsam, and resin, going down to Egypt. Judah said to his brothers, "What do we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come on, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay a hand on him, for he's our brother, our own flesh." And his brothers agreed. When Midianite traders passed by, his brothers pulled Joseph out of the pit and sold him for 20 pieces of silver to the Ishmaelites, who took Joseph to Egypt. When Reuben returned to the pit and saw that Joseph was not there, he tore his clothes. He went back to his brothers and said, "The boy's gone. What am I going to do?" So they took Joseph's robe, slaughtered a male goat, and dipped the robe in its blood. They sent the long-sleeve robe to their father and said, "We found this. Examine it. Is it your son's robe or not?" His father recognized it. "It is my son's robe," he said. "A vicious animal has devoured him. Joseph has been torn to pieces." Then Jacob tore his clothes, put sackcloth around his waist, and mourned for his son many days. All his sons and daughters tried to comfort him. And I'm sure the sons were really good at trying to comfort him. But he refused to be comforted. "No," he said, "I will go down to Sheol to my son, mourning." And his father wept for him. Meanwhile, the Midianites sold Joseph in Egypt to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and the captain of the guards. Again, we are left wondering about the motives of some of these characters. We see that Reuben absolutely did want to save Joseph, but we don't know exactly why. It could have been that he really did care, that he loved Joseph, that he didn't want to see him die, but it also might have been because Reuben was the oldest, and if anything happens to Joseph, he's like, "I'm going to be held responsible." It also could have been that he was trying to get back in his father's good graces after what had happened with him sleeping with Bilhah. Same thing with Judah. We don't know. Did Judah actually care about saving Joseph? Maybe. But he also may have been scared to go through with this, or he may have just been greedy. Like, wow, what's the point of this? Let's make some money. But unfortunately, seeds of hate grow exponentially when you get a mob together. And this group of brothers function like a mob. They kind of remind me of the crowd that demanded Jesus' crucifixion. And so they all get together, and one of them comes up with the idea, "Hey, why don't we kill him?" And then the mob mentality kicks in, and before you know it, they're all signing off on this plan except for Reuben. It's pretty amazing where people will go when they get in the wrong crowd. We've seen a lot of that the last few years. But like I mentioned earlier, when we are the ones bearing these seeds of hatred, we need to act quickly before the feelings spiral and snowball. And the brothers did not do that. They harbored the seeds. They dwelled on them. They nurtured their hate instead of confessing it, repenting of it, and seeking reconciliation. Do not do that. If you find a seed of hate in your heart, dig it up as soon as possible. Do not leave it there. I'll leave that up for just another second because I'm about to change the slide. Matthew 5:23 and 24 says, "Therefore, if you bring your gift to the altar, and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go your way. First, be reconciled to your brother, and then come and offer your gift." This is just one of many scriptures that teach us how dangerous and how wrong it is to harbor things in our hearts, whether it's anger, resentment, hatred. It's not good for us. It's not healthy. It's not Christ-like. It doesn't belong in our lives. Ephesians 4:26 and 27 says, "In your anger, do not sin. Do not let the sun go down while you are still angry, and do not give the devil a foothold." You see, the longer that we let those seeds stay in the soil of our hearts, the more likely they're going to be to grow and to sprout. It's inevitable that if we leave them there, the devil has a foothold. Now he has something that he can grab a hold of inside of us and start to use it and manipulate it. And it's going to sprout. And it's not always easy because you might be convinced that your hatred is justified. But it's not. And it will hurt you. 1 John 3:15 says, "Everyone who hates his brother or sister is a murderer. And you know that no murderer has eternal life remaining in him." And in the very next chapter, 4:20, "If someone says, 'I love God,' and yet hates his brother or sister, he is a liar. For the one who does not love his brother or sister whom he has seen cannot love God whom he has not seen." There's plenty more scripture that I could use. The reality is that the only sin that we should be unwilling to forgive is the sin that Jesus is unwilling to save us from. And guess what? There aren't any. There's no sin that he did not die for. Now, I won't get into, if you're familiar with the blasphemy of the Holy Spirit verse, we won't get into that, but you know what I'm saying. Colossians 3:13 says, "The Lord has forgiven you, so you must also forgive." How are we supposed to forgive? The way that Jesus forgives us. So, how can we harbor hate, resentment? We can't. It's dangerous. In fact, it'll kill us. So don't do that. Dig it up as soon as possible. And one of the other things that I noticed about this story, and something that we'll see continuously through Joseph's life, is how he refused to take on the victim mentality. You see, this is just the beginning of injustices done to Joseph. There's going to be so many. But he never lets that define him. Kent Hughes put it well. He said, "As we have noted, Joseph had ample reason for self-pity, rage, anger with God, and revenge. He had immense reasons to become enslaved to victimhood. He had been relationally crippled by his father's overweening favoritism. He had suffered from the yours, mine, ours relational pathology of polygamy. He had been monstrously abused by his brothers. The scars were there to stay. Their homicidal rage, his beating and humiliation, their demeaning, piercing epithets, the agonizing trip to Egypt and his naked humiliation on the slave block in Egypt. What an opportunity for enslavement to victimhood. But there is not a poor me hint anywhere in the entire Genesis account of Joseph. And in Egypt, his treatment would become even worse. What the writer wants us to see is that though enslaved, Joseph chose to reject the slavery of self-pity and victimhood. See, Joseph's brothers took on the victim mentality. And where did it lead them? It led them to hatred and vengeance. But Joseph refused to go that route, and it led him to faith and forgiveness, as we will see later on. Joyce Baldwin also recognized this about Joseph, and she said, it's the kind of family background that can cause the youngster great pain and lead to a warped, inward-looking personality, full of fear and resentment. That it did not do so in Joseph's case is part of the charm of this story. His personality was remarkably resilient. And so it should be with us, with Christians. Because injustices are real. But the victim mentality has no place in the Christian life. Victimhood leads to resentment, hatred, vengeance, and constant discontentment when we are called to be forgiving and content in all circumstances and to keep our eyes on eternity. Our circumstances do not define us. Our history does not define us. We are defined by our relationship with Christ. We may suffer injustice. We may be lied about, hated, and persecuted, but we are victorious in Jesus. John 16:33 says, I have said these things to you that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation, but take heart. I have overcome the world. Have peace. Take heart. If you genuinely know and are known by Jesus, greater is He that is in you than he who is in the world. But be on guard, because seeds of hate, they grow ever so easily in this broken world and in our broken hearts. Keep your eyes open for them, not only in your own heart, but in the hearts of others. Right? If you see one, don't ignore it. We can take proactive measures to keep them from being planted by being considerate of others. Assume the best. Give people the benefit of the doubt. Not everything should be overlooked. There are things that sometimes we just have to deal with, we have to address. But Proverbs also teaches us that it's our glory to overlook an offense. Now, we shouldn't need to tiptoe around everybody in life like we're walking on eggshells, but we also don't need to run through like a bull in a china shop either. And if you see, find, even get a glimpse of a seed of hate in your own heart, dig it out. Do not leave it there. Get rid of it as soon as possible. And pray to God that He would show you if there are any in there that you are not even consciously aware of. And finally, do not underestimate hate. It grows quickly. And it grows even faster in the age of the internet. And be ready. Because if you want to follow Jesus faithfully, the time is coming quickly that it's going to cost you a lot more than it ever has. I'm fully aware. I've said this before. I'm totally aware that I could end up in prison in this country in my lifetime for nothing more than preaching the Word of God. And if that day comes, I do not want to play the victim because I have victory in Jesus. Amen. I hope that you have victory in Jesus. And that's what we're going to sing just in a minute. But first, let's pray. God, thank you. Thank you for Christ. Thank you for that victory that we have. Thank you that He has overcome the world and that He is greater in us than the one who is in the world. God, hatred is a problem, and it is a growing problem in our world, in our country, in our own community. And Lord, I pray that we would be prepared to be hated. Jesus said that's what we need to expect. So let's expect it. And maybe we live faithfully enough that it actually happens. God, we don't want to be hated for the wrong reasons. We don't want to be hated because we're hypocritical or because we're judgmental in the wrong way, in an unbiblical way, or because we're greedy, because we're rude, mean. But God, help us if the only reason that we're not hated in the world is because we're cowardly. No one has any reason to hate us because no one knows what we believe. I pray that we would be strong, that we would be courageous, that we would be ready for where that takes us. And God, I pray that you would help us when it comes to hatred, Lord. We need to hate sin, and God, help us that, so many have grown complacent to sin. We're kind of neutral about it. Sometimes we're just like, I don't really like it, but we don't really hate it, and we need to hate sin. But then there's so much of this unhealthy, unrighteous, sinful hate that grows in our hearts. And I pray that we would be ready to recognize it, that we would keep our eyes peeled, that we wouldn't go about our life just focused on ourselves and not thinking about others, but that we would look for those seeds when we recognize them, that we would dig them up out of our own hearts. And if we see them in a heart of someone else, that we would work to help them dig them up. God, may we not hold on to things, harbor resentment, anger, grudges, whatever it is, Lord. And when I'm not naive, I know that in a room with this many people, there are things being harbored. Someone is holding on to something this morning, and the Holy Spirit is knocking on their hearts and saying, you got to let go. You got to stop. You're just hurting yourself. It's going to eat you alive. So I pray that they would let go. And search our hearts, oh God. Some of us may be sitting here this morning and we're thinking to ourselves, oh, I don't have any of that. But maybe we do. Maybe there's something we don't even recognize. Show it to us. Don't let us keep walking in darkness, blind. Wake us up, God. May the light shine in those deepest places. And may we walk as lightness in this world full of hate. The river of love that Christ is pouring out on us, God, let it overflow out of our lives and spill over into our families, our neighbors, our community, and all of our brothers and sisters in Christ all over this world, that they would see what true love is. God, we ask these things in Christ's most precious holy name. Amen.